Hi everyone, welcome back to Difference Frames the World, a channel to see the world from a different angle. Let me start today's video with something not so DFTW style. Please note it is not a drama, not a TV show, not even a dream. Anyone with a brain could not have thought of it happening at all. You would also lose your mind if I told you that, in a single night, the US flew deep into another country, bypassed its defenses, and abducted a sitting president in his own home, took him and his wife away, crossing the border without issuing them an invitation letter and valid visas, and dropped them in New York before sunrise. And the sitting president was even so nice that he said Happy New Year to those who kidnapped him and his wife. You need to be super imaginative to figure out what happened. No declaration of war. No long battle. Just hours. If that sounds unbelievable and even unthinkable, it already happened. Yes, we're talking about something that, honestly, would have sounded crazy several days ago. We already uploaded a video yesterday about this topic, immediately after it was disclosed to the public, and now I'm bringing you a deeper dive into how it happened and why it matters. On January 3rd, the US carried out a military strike inside Venezuela and captured the country's president, Nicolás Maduro, along with his wife. And the questions come fast. Why would Washington go as far as arresting a sitting foreign head of state? How did this operation face so little resistance? Was this really about fighting drugs, or was oil always the real prize? And if this can happen to Venezuela, who's next? Let's break it down, starting with how the US and Venezuela got here in the first place. How did the US and Venezuela get here? Back in August 2025, the US announced a $50 million bounty for Maduro, accusing him of working with criminal networks to move drugs to the United States. But the bad blood between the US and Venezuela goes back more than 20 years. Before Hugo Chávez came to power in 1999, Venezuela was closely aligned with the US. Its politics leaned heavily toward the West, and its economy depended almost entirely on oil exports. The problem at that time was that most of the profits went to foreign oil companies and local elites, while ordinary Venezuelans struggled. When Hugo Chávez took office, he flipped that system. He nationalized oil, pushed wealth redistribution, and openly challenged US influence across Latin America. From Washington's perspective, this wasn't just policy disagreement, it was a direct threat. Sanctions followed. After Chávez died in 2013, Maduro took over and stuck to the same approach: more state control and more criticism of the US. Washington responded with harsher sanctions, accusing Maduro of election manipulation and democratic backsliding. Things really exploded in 2018, when the US rejected Maduro's re-election and backed opposition leader Juan Guaidó as interim president. Diplomatic ties were cut and they never recovered. Then it was getting worse by the day, with Venezuela's economic collapse, waves of migration heading toward the US border, and its closer ties with Russia and Iran. At that point, Venezuela wasn't just a political problem, it became a strategic headache. So that brings us to the unthinkable kidnapping. The US has long wanted to solve the Venezuela problem. Officially, the US framed everything as part of a war on drugs. Since 2020, the Justice Department has accused Maduro and his top officials of narcoterrorism. When Trump returned to the White House, fighting drug trafficking became central to his border and immigration agenda. By mid-2025, the US had dramatically escalated the conflict by deploying a massive naval force in Caribbean waters and claiming to sink dozens of so-called drug smuggling boats. Then came US intelligence covert operations, the designation of Venezuela's government as a foreign terrorist organization, and a full blockade on Venezuelan oil shipments. But here's where things start to fall apart. According to the UN, Venezuela's own government, and even US drug enforcement agencies, Venezuela isn't classified as a major drug-producing or transit country. There's no solid evidence of large-scale drug cultivation or processing. So if this wasn't really about drugs, what was it about? That question got a blunt answer on January 4, 2026, when Trump said the quiet part out loud. He stated that the US planned to take control of Venezuela and its oil. Remember, Venezuela holds the largest proven oil reserves on Earth, roughly 300 billion barrels. Trump said U.S. oil companies would move in, invest billions, repair damaged infrastructure, and restart production, while the oil embargo stays in place. Venezuela's vice president didn't sugarcoat it. She said this was regime change for oil, plain and simple, with anti-drug language used as cover. So then comes another question that shocked many observers. Why was Maduro captured so easily? Why did this operation go so smoothly? Reports suggest there was almost no serious resistance. Many have described it as a naked display of imperial power, especially shocking for Latin America. In just a few hours, the U.S. kidnapped a sitting president from another sovereign country. Symbolically, that hit hard. According to people familiar with the operation, the CIA had been quietly gathering intelligence inside Venezuela since at least August 2025, tracking Maduro's daily routines, movements, residences, and habits. The operation itself, called Absolute Resolve, involved more than 150 aircraft taking off from land and sea bases. U.S. forces reportedly neutralized Venezuelan air defenses, flew helicopters straight into Caracas, and reached Maduro's residence just after 1 a.m. at midnight. Less than an hour later, Maduro and his wife were in custody.
In Venezuela, the team did an incredible job. They rehearsed and practiced like nobody's ever seen. And I was told by real military people that there's no other country on earth that could do such a maneuver. If you would have seen what happened, I mean, I watched it literally like I was watching a television show.
By dawn, U.S. forces were gone. So now we're left with the biggest question of all. What comes next for Venezuela and the region? With Maduro gone, Venezuela is in uncharted territory. Most analysts expect a long political struggle, possibly an interim government, internal power battles, and heavy foreign influence behind the scenes. Trump has already said the U.S. will oversee Venezuela until what he calls a safe and fair transition is complete. He has openly discussed shaping who leads the country next, even hinting at opposition figure Maria Corina Machado. Maria Corina Machado is the winner of the 2025 Nobel Peace Prize. The Norwegian Nobel Committee awarded her the prize in October 2025 for her efforts to promote democratic rights in Venezuela and her struggle for a peaceful transition from dictatorship to democracy. Venezuela's government has called the operation an illegal invasion, demanded Maduro's release, and warned that the country will never become a colony. Trump has also issued warnings to Colombia and Cuba, which are signals that this may not end with Venezuela. It brings us to the bigger picture. Is the Monroe Doctrine back? Many experts think this isn't just about Venezuela, it's about the return of the Monroe Doctrine. A new U.S. national security strategy labels the Western Hemisphere as a front line for American security and influence. Latin America is back at the center of U.S. strategic thinking. The Monroe Doctrine, first announced in 1823, treated the Americas as a U.S. sphere of influence. Over time, it justified invasions, coups, sanctions, and regime change. From invading Grenada in 1983 to Panama in 1989, the pattern is familiar. Trump has even said openly that U.S. dominance in the Western Hemisphere will never again be questioned. Some U.S. media now call this the Trump Doctrine, a modern Monroe Doctrine with fewer filters. So here's the big picture. The U.S. intervention in Venezuela is not about just one thing. It's about domestic politics, election pressure, crude oil, global power competition, and a long history of treating Latin America as a strategic priority. But the real story is still unfolding. If this operation sets a precedent, does it reinforce U.S. power, or does it signal a more unstable and dangerous future for Latin America? Mexico says it has bad luck to stay too close to the U.S. and too far away from God. Will other nations in Latin America feel the same way? It is worth mentioning that the military operation did not get congressional approval, even though the two U.S. parties have rarely formed a tough consensus on Venezuela policy. Donald Trump did not even bother with the formality of chatting with those lawmakers, which angered former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, a constant critic of Donald Trump. Perhaps she is afraid that Chinese President Xi Jinping may follow Trump's lead, capture the Taiwanese leader Lai Ching-te, and take him to Beijing. Venezuela is an independent country, not a province or state of the United States, but the US can do whatever it likes there, and it even calls the kidnapping an arrest. Just look at the photo of the sitting president of Venezuela, which Donald Trump posted on social media to brag about his success in hijacking a foreign country's leader. What if Xi Jinping had done the same to Lai Ching-te and other separatists in Taiwan, a part of his own territory? What will the collective West say about the so-called Chinese tyrant?